And with that, I think we should get started. You can show my screen. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome. Last session at this year's Global Azure Austria. Super happy that so many came to this session from me. It will be about OpenAI function calling. Let me quickly start by getting to know you a little bit. So let me ask you a question. Show of hands. Who would say you are very familiar with the OpenAI API because you have used it multiple times? No, a little bit. Some of you are hesitating, but not a lot of hands. So you are all at the correct spot, because today we are diving in a very specific feature of the OpenAI API, which, if you ask me, is one of the most powerful features that OpenAI offers for developers. Let me start this session by describing to you what this function calling thing is all about. Now, what I have here is a typical ChatGPT 4 interface. And as you all know, with ChatGPT, we can simply generate some text. I could say something like, generate a bedtime story for my 5-year-old, and you will get a bedtime story of your 5-year-old. But what happens if you ask the question, I will be in Vienna tomorrow. What should I do in the afternoon? Well, you might say that's a pretty clear question, and of course ChatGPT should be able to answer that. Well, yes, ChatGPT could, but if I add a little bit of an extra thing here and say, what can I do tomorrow in Vienna when taking account the current weather report, ChatGPT has a huge problem. ChatGPT simply has no idea how the weather in Vienna will be tomorrow. Well, if you allow ChatGPT to Bing the internet, well, to Microsoft, Google the internet if you want, then it could find maybe a weather report for Vienna tomorrow and use the internet to find the weather. But of course, it would be much better if we could provide, as developers, ChatGPT with a way of asking us to perform certain functions. For instance, we could say to ChatGPT, hey ChatGPT, if you need something from me, like find the weather in Vienna tomorrow, tell me, because I have a function which is called get weather report for tomorrow. I can provide the result to you, and then you can use this response to formulate a better answer to my question. I could do that with prompting. I could ask something like, I will be in Vienna tomorrow. What could I do? Take the weather report, take the weather into account when answering. This alone is not perfect, but I could tell, for instance, ChatGPT, by the way, I can offer you a function called getCurrentWeather if you want me to call this function for you. Let me know. Let's try. I don't know what ChatGPT. That's wonderful. Vienna is a city, blah, blah, blah. Depending on the weather. Okay, it didn't work very well. It gives me both options when it's rainy and when it's a sunny day and so on. But I couldn't really make it work so that ChatGPT will not directly give me an answer, but I want ChatGPT to say, okay, Rainer, first please give me the current weather. Do whatever you can, make some magic happen, tell me the weather, and then I will give you an answer. And that's what function calling is all about. Function calling is a capability for you to give ChatGPT a callback possibility. You have to understand that typically, let me go to my Visual Studio Code here and draw a little bit. Typically, you have here in the background, you have ChatGPT, the API, of course. Then you have your custom app. This is what you currently program. I'm not talking about end users using ChatGPT. I'm talking about developers using ChatGPT as an API, okay? And here you have the client. Now, typically, the client asks your app a certain question, maybe a bot or whatever. This client app sends something to ChatGPT. ChatGPT generates an answer. You take this answer, you send it back to the client. That's a very, very simple chatbot. But this is not what function calling is all about. You give ChatGPT a callback mechanism. So what you can do is you can say, ChatGPT, you are allowed to ask me as an app to call a certain function. Whatever this function is, we will take a look at that in code in a second. Then, without showing the client the result, we can provide a response to ChatGPT. ChatGPT will then ask us the next question. That might again be a function call. And we have to provide the next answer. And that goes on and on and on and on until ChatGPT is convinced that it has enough information to finally give us an answer which we can provide to the end user. So there is a lot going on behind the scenes. This is some kind of back-channel communication between the app that you as the developer writes and ChatGPT. And this is what function calling is all about. This is what we want to do. Essentially, function calling is a way of prompt engineering. Because at the end of the day, you are just talking to the GPT model. But the API formulates the prompt in a way that the GPT model can clearly state, I don't want to give an answer before you have to call this function. That's the whole idea, okay? Now, my sample with getCurrentWeather is really simple. It becomes way more complicated if the way from question to answer is not just one function call away. Imagine that we have multiple functions. For instance, we could say we have the first function, which is called get GPS coordinates of a certain city. And the second function is get weather. But this get weather gets an input parameter, the GPS coords. Now, if I ask ChatGPT, what should I do tomorrow in Vienna? The problem is way more complicated. Because now ChatGPT needs to find a plan. It needs to understand that it needs to come up with an algorithm, which brings it from the question, what should I do tomorrow in Vienna, to the answer. Because first it has to find the GPS coordinates of Vienna. Otherwise, it cannot use the second function. And if it cannot use the second function, it cannot come up with an answer. So it needs to come up with dependent method calls. So I can go here, get GPS coordinates, then the result of the get GPS coordinates have to be given to the get weather function as an input parameter, and the result of this thing can then be used to generate the answer to the question that I want to have. But that can be even more complicated. Imagine that I ask ChatGPT with the same functions, give me the city with the best weather tomorrow, taking into account all the Landeshauptstädte in Austria. Of course, ChatGPT knows that it has Vienna and Linz and Salzburg and Graz and so on, but it needs to find for all of these cities the GPS coordinates, and it needs to find all the weather reports based on all these GPS coordinates. Then it has to analyze the result, which is a kind of data table, and come up with the best city with the best weather. And ChatGPT can't do that. It can do that. It goes so far that ChatGPT automatically detects whether it should parallelize these queries. It will not ask you the question, get the GPS coordinates from Vienna. Once you give it the answer, get it for Graz. Once you give it the answer, get it for Salzburg. It will send you all these questions in parallel because it is smart when writing the internal algorithm for calling all these functions. You, as the developer, you can parallelize the work on these functions, really do the work as fast as possible, and provide the answers to ChatGPT in one go. Parallelization, conditional calling, sequences, where an input parameter of one function is the output parameter of another function, and post-processing of the results. And all these capabilities are hidden behind this feature of function calling. This part of my talk should describe the motivation. Why do we look at that? Before we take a look into code, Do you have any general questions about why function calling is relevant? Did I make it clear? Was it good? Good. Fine. So let's stop talk theory. Let's take a look at practice. What do I have here? I didn't open this one yet. All the samples that I show are available online on GitHub. If you are interested in the details and if you want to have the source code after my talk, feel free to send me a direct message. I can easily give you the GitHub repository, or I can also show it to you at the end. Maybe I can show you a QR code so you can download it. The first example that I would like to show you is an example written in .NET. I will show you examples in TypeScript and in .NET, but don't worry if you are a Java developer, a Python developer, a Rust developer, a Go developer. It works everywhere the same. You can use any programming language that can send an HTTP request. You can try this stuff with Postman if you want. You don't need a programming language. It's really, really simple, but I use a little bit of code to demonstrate how this really works. So let's take a look at this very, very simple example. For those of you in the audience who don't speak German, I'm super sorry. I have a little bit of demo data here in German. I hope you can understand it. If not, please ask, okay? I have prepared an example which is very near to the heart of the students in the school, because what I did is I created, or I downloaded, a so-called Stundentafel for a school like this. It's not exactly this school, it's for an HTL für Informationstechnologie, IT HTL, and Stundentafel means how many hours on a certain topics do the students spend per week. For instance, if I scroll down a little bit, we will see that there is angewandte mathematics, and you see in 5 years, the students have 4 hours in the first year, 3 hours per week in the second year, and so on, with no dedicated exercise time. If I scroll down, software development, they have 3 hours theory and 2 hours of exercise time, okay? This is a so-called Stundentafel, and in Austria, you have this as part of the Austrian law. There is a law, Gesetzblatt, where these Stundentafeln are defined for every school type. And we want to build a chatbot which we can ask questions to about the Stundentafel. And believe me, ChatGPT knows a lot, but he does not know exactly how the Austrian school system works. So we need to provide ChatGPT with a little bit of function calling. Let me show you how I did that. I will not show you all the code. I will really go into details only for the very important ones. Let me change that one to turbo. Turbo. Messed it up. Students can ask questions, and the assistant should answer questions about the Stundentafel. If I scroll down a little bit, what you are going to see is that we can provide ChatGPT with a list of so-called tools. In ChatGPT, there are 3 different areas of tools. The first one is retrieval. Retrieval means that I can give ChatGPT documents like CSV files, PDF files, Word documents, and it can automatically get the content from there and use it when presenting the answer. This is not the tool that I want to talk about. The second tool is a code interpreter. You will see that a little bit later. Essentially what code interpreter is, it means that ChatGPT can ad hoc write Python code and execute it. You will see that a little bit later. This is again not the core topic of my talk today. The third tool that ChatGPT supports is function calling. And here you see how you give ChatGPT the callback. You have to provide a so-called function definition. This function definition has a name, as you can see it here, has a description, as you can see it here. Just describe it in English, in German, in your favorite language, in Klingon if you want. I think it understands Klingon too. I don't know how I would type it, but probably it will work. And as you can see in this example, these functions can also ask for input parameters. Here you have the subject name like mathematics or religion or biology or whatever, and the Jahrgang, this is the year in which the students are. You can say that some of these input parameters are required. Please note that the entire specification of the input parameter adheres to JSON schema, to the JSON schema standard that you might know from Swagger, OpenAI specification, OAS, maybe you know that. So that is just JSON schema that you give it here. So you can define this is a date, this is a number, this is a string, and a lot of other things. You can simply describe what you want. What you do not need to provide for ChatGPT is the return values. Your function can return whatever you want. It can return a string. It can return JSON. It can return CSV. It can return XML. If you are as old as me, you can return an INI file if you want. Most of you will not know what an INI file is, but I don't care. Those of you who are old enough maybe know what INI files are. You can return whatever you want at the end of the day. You can return C# code if you want, whatever. The ChatGPT sees it just as any other input, like any other prompt. So there is no strict definition of the response. Okay? Just return anything. Good. We have here two functions. The first one is get Unterrichtsfächer, and the second one is get Unterrichtsstunde pro Woche. And in this case, the second one, how many hours do the students have per week, requires an input parameter, Fach, which is a result of the first question. See? So I can ask, what are the topics? And then I can say, for this topic, how many hours? That's the idea. Good? Now, how does this look like when you write code? Well, at the end of the day, you use the typical completions API. Many of you probably know that ChatGPT currently offers two different APIs for chat completions. There is the traditional one. Let's call it the vintage API. No, it's the production API, the current production API. And then there's the new API, which is the assistant API, which is currently in preview. I will show you both, okay? This is the one first, which is in production. So if you want to take something into production tomorrow, you have to use exactly that API. You essentially send any kind of question of the user to ChatGPT. Now, ChatGPT will respond, and then you have to add some kind of if statement to the processing of the response. Because on the one hand side, it could happen that ChatGPT gives you the answer immediately. That is just text. Please, Rainer, present this text to the end user. Or it could give you a tool call. That is now a callback. So ChatGPT tells you, please don't send what I send you to the end user, but answer this question first. So we have an if statement here. Once we get a tool call, we at the end of the day will have some kind of switch statement because ChatGPT will tell us which function to call on our behalf. Here, in my case, I say get Unterrichtsfächer and get Unterrichtsstunden pro Woche because these are the two functions that I have. It will also give me the arguments as a JSON string. So I need to deserialize the arguments, as you can see it here, into the input parameter as defined in the function description. Okay? Please be aware, we are dealing with an API, with an AI here. AIs make mistakes. They make a lot of mistakes. Sometimes they call functions which do not exist. Sometimes they send you JSON, which isn't JSON. Sometimes they give you parameter names which do not exist. AIs hallucinate. It really depends which version of GPT you use. If you use the latest and greatest GPT-4 APIs or models, you will be quite safe. I haven't seen a lot of hallucination going on with GPT-4. If you want to save money and you use the quick but incredibly fast GPT-3.5 models, you will end up getting a lot of mistakes in that area. So never trust your input. It's like user input. GPT makes mistakes. But there is another very important thing here. As developers, just like I think it was Mario who said, the AI of today might look completely different as the AI of yesterday. So the AI changes. So when we get an error, when OpenAI sends us a wrong function, please do not let your app crash and show the user a message box that says, please contact your administrator, something went wrong. On the contrary, send a response to ChatGPT telling ChatGPT, hey, ChatGPT, you are wrong. That function doesn't exist. And in many cases, it can fix its own mistake. So error handling with AI application is very different from error handling in traditional applications. A mistake from the AI should not lead to an end-user visible error message. Tell the AI that it's wrong, and in many cases, it can fix its own errors. Okay? So, in our case, we are simply doing some magic. And the important thing here is that you can do whatever you want. It's a callback. Do you want to change an IoT device, turning up the temperature in your living room? You can do that. Do you want to grab some data from your ERP database by generating a SQL statement? You can do that. Do you want to read a smart sensor somewhere in the school? You can do that. It's your code. You're equipping ChatGPT with the capability to talk to the outside world, and you provide the code. You don't have to be afraid of ChatGPT. It will not directly talk to your IoT device. It will not directly turn off your 3D printer. It will not directly write something into your database. It's always your code that will really do the work. ChatGPT is just asking you to do something on your behalf. Sorry, on its behalf. Good? Nice. So if I scroll down, this is just a little bit of stuff taking a look from this JSON file, and at the end of the day, we give an answer. Let me show you how this looks like. So let me run this guy. Oh, very good. I'm in the wrong folder. We are in the function calling stuff here. And then we need to go into function calling.net, and now I am in this, and I call .NET Run. Good. My font is pretty large, so you can see it. So yeah. Hello. You can ask me questions about the lectures in our school, especially the number of hours per lecture type and year. That's approximately what the system is saying here. And what I'm going to say is, I love math. Does your school offer math in all 5 years? That's a pretty complicated question, and I'll show you why. Ich mag Mathe. Werden wir Mathe in allen 5 Jahrgängen haben? I love math. Will we have math in all 5 years? Now, let's quickly think through what that means. First, we use the word Mathe, math. This is not the correct name of the lecture in the school. It's called Angewandte Mathematik. It's pretty different, but still, ChatGPT has to find out that Mathe relates to mathematics. Additionally, it can't ask the function about all 5 years. It needs to split that up into 5 function calls because we can only return the number of hours per lesson type per year. So let's see what ChatGPT is going to do. Of course, it's thinking. And you see, it automatically, let me pause here for a second, it automatically said, before I can ask for the number of hours, I need to find out which lecture types we have in the school. So the first function that it calls is called getUnterrichtsfächer. Then it will probably, here, understand that the correct name of Mathe is Angewandte Mathematik. So it found out with its intelligence that Mathe will very likely mean Angewandte Mathematik. And as you can see here, we have 5 calls, concurrent calls, to the get Unterrichtsstunden pro Woche call. This is exactly what I meant. It's super intelligent. I have to return all these 5 calls, and then the system tells me, yep, Angewandte Mathematik is available in all 5 years, and this is the number of hours you're going to have. Awesome, isn't it? This is really awesome. Think of what you can do to that. And you can give ChatGPT not just 2 functions. You can give it 10, you can give it 20, you can give it 50. I think the limit is somewhere in the hundreds. I don't know the number from the top of my head. You have a question?
Yeah, excuse me, can you debug that as well?
Debug, yeah, of course, we could, but I don't have the time. If you want to see it debugged, just come to me after the talk and I can show you that. Of course I can debug it. Absolutely no problem. No problem at all. So this was a quick introduction into the motivation and into a simple example. let's make it a little bit more interesting, okay? Let's make it a little bit more interesting. So let me go here and go into, oops, this one. Good. This example is a little bit more elaborate. In this example, it's again from the school. And in this example, I have a function, as you can see it here. The function is called getPriority per lesson type. So 1 means that this lesson is very, very important. In this school, for instance, mathematics or physics, very important topics. On the other hand, if we like it or not, biology doesn't exist in this school. Well, it's not true. In Medizintechnik, biology is super interesting, but in informatics, in computer science and so on, biology doesn't exist. Okay, so this is a typical thing here. So here you can see that's another function. But in this case, I'm using a particular feature of OpenAI, and that is called streaming. What does streaming mean? Streaming means that the API of OpenAI does not block the execution of your code until it has completed the generating of the response. But you will see OpenAI give you partial responses. Do you know this UI from ChatGPT, from the user interface that you typically use? If I ask it a question, what should I visit in Leonding today? I can do something like this. If I ask it the question, do you see that here token by token by token comes up? It's not important what it has to say about Leonding. Yes, it has to say a little bit about Leonding, but you see, the system is not blocking until the entire answer is there, but we can watch ChatGPT typing. And that is super, super important for user experience. As developers, we need to use streaming, otherwise our users will be very, very disappointed from the usability and from the performance of our APIs. Do you know how streaming works? This is not a talk about streaming, but can you show of hands? Have you ever taken a look how streaming works with the OpenAI API? Only a few hands. It uses a protocol in the background that is called server-sent events. At the end of the day, it has a single HTTP request, and the response delivers the partial result message by message by message. But this is not WebSockets. This is not a bidirectional real-time communication. It's a streaming protocol, simply streaming the chunks of information from the server to the client. This is streaming. And the reason why I talk about streaming is that streaming is also available in conjunction with function calling. But your code will be way more complicated. You know why? Because it will stream the information of the function call too. It will send you first only the name of the function, then the first few letters of the JSON, then the next few letters of the JSON, then the next few letters of the JSON. So you will not get the entire function call in one go. But you have to manually write code to gather together all the necessary information, and you have to write code to automatically detect when the function call is complete so you can execute it. So at the end of the day, take a look at this example. This example shows how it's done. But at the end of the day, and that is what I want to take away from this, please be aware that function calling together with streaming complicates your code massively. So if you're just building an MVP, a minimum viable product, forget about streaming. Accept bad user experience. If you just want to see whether ChatGPT is smart enough, just write function calling and add streaming later. It will be complicated. Okay? I think I don't need to start this example because, yeah, it's just doing function calling, but you will see word by word by word. Take a look at the code after this talk. I would like, on the contrary, go into the next example, and this example is another example. Let me open up the correct one. Yeah, this is exactly the one that I want. A TypeScript example. The difference with the TypeScript example is that it's no longer using the old production API. It's strange, really. I'm talking about the old API, but it's the one which is in production. We are living in very strange times. I consider production APIs as old and preview APIs as, I don't know, current state of the art. No, just kidding. The assistant API, the new API, has been around for many months now. And it is pretty stable. So I guess the assistant API will become the new production API just around the corner. Maybe in a few weeks, maybe in a few months, but it's really just a matter of a short time that the new API will be available. So if you start with an OpenAI project tomorrow, use the new API. Forget the production API. If you want to go into production tomorrow, you have no chance. Sorry, you cannot use the assistant API. But the assistant API is the new API to learn. If you are new starting with OpenAI, forget the production API at all. Only deal with the new API. It's completely different. It's not just a small, tiny difference. It's completely different. Unfortunately, I have only 45 minutes, so I can't go into the details, but I have various videos on this topic online. So let's take a look at this example, which uses the new API. Now, let me show you how this works. In this case, I am providing with the new API tools. And in this case, I'm providing 3 tools. The first one, we are no longer in the context of the school. We are now in famous AdventureWorks. Anybody knows AdventureWorks? Yeah, I guess so. In a Microsoft conference. For those of you who are too young, AdventureWorks is a very famous, iconic sample database. Everybody who learned SQL, the standard query language, with SQL Server has probably dealt with AdventureWorks at some times. It's a fictitious bike shop at the end of the day. And as you can see here, we have a get customers function definition. It retrieves a filtered list of customers. And OpenAI can optionally provide filters for customer ID, first name, middle name, last name, and company name. So I give it the possibility to do a query in a database. That is really opening up an ERP database using SQL for ChatGPT. I'm giving ChatGPT access to my precious relational database. That is what I'm doing here. Let me show you the implementation. It's really not complicated. Here you are. No, here you aren't. Where is it? Functions, here it is. I opened the wrong folder, here it is. This is get customers, and as you can see, this is just a select statement, as you can see here. And I'm building the where clause depending on the input that I get from ChatGPT, okay? Do you feel a little bit of a bad feeling in your stomach giving your AI access to the database? How would your feeling be if that wouldn't be a select statement but an insert or delete or update statement? Would you probably be shouting and running out of the door? Well, that's up to you, what you allow the AI to do. But at the end of the day, you can allow the AI whatever he wants to do. It can even write SQL on its own. You can't provide your AI with a function which is called execute arbitrary SQL and simply rely on the fact that the AI knows what it's doing. Obviously, you will not do that. But theoretically, you could do that. Can I finish this example and then I will take questions, okay? But I think you get the idea. Now let's take a look at the second one. The second one is called get products. And just like master data about customers, I can query products. And the third one is the most interesting one. In this case, I'm allowing ChatGPT to do a revenue analysis. It can again provide some filter capabilities, but I'm also allowing ChatGPT to aggregate values dynamically. It can aggregate values total revenue per year, per month, per customer, per product, total revenue per customer and year. Understand what I mean? This is a pretty powerful query generator in the hands of the AI. And let's see whether the AI is smart enough to use this powerful tool on its own. So let me run this example. npm start. As I said, you can take a look at this example later on. I don't want to bore you showing you the code. The first question that I'm going to ask this API is, I will visit Orlando Guy tomorrow. Give me a revenue breakdown of his revenue per product. Absolute revenue and percentages. Also show me his total revenue. This is a pretty complicated query. First, the system must understand that Orlando Guy seems to be a customer. It needs to understand that Orlando is the first name and Guy is the last name. It needs to understand that it has to retrieve master data about the customer called Orlando Guy. Then it needs to understand that it needs revenue data grouped by product, because this is what I asked the system to do. So it needs to understand the grouping. And then, based on the absolute revenue number, it has to find the percentage breakdown. So it has to do a little bit of math to come up how many percentage is this related to the total sum. So let's see what's going to happen. Okay, the first thing is, let me show you that. It called the function getCustomers perfect. And it decided that Guy seems to be the last name. So it asks my API, hey API, go to my precious ERP database and find me all the customers with the last name Guy. Maybe we will find Orlando there. And the next question is, again, let me see. No, it's not again. The next question is, oh, executing query. Yeah, that is good. Here you see the last name, blah, blah, blah. That is good. So let's see what the next thing was. Oh, it did a lot. Next, what is that? What is that? Yes, this one. It found Orlando Guy. Orlando Guy had the customer ID 29773. Very nice, and that is correct. I know the ID because of my tests. And then it understood that it needs to find the customer products revenue. That's exactly that function where it groups by product ID. That's exactly what I want to have. That's exactly what I want to have. Group by product true. It understood the capability of group the results. Then we returned the revenue per product. And you see what it did then? It understands that it needs to come up with the product names because as humans we are not very good with product IDs. So it calls the getProduct method in parallel, and we can go to the database to find the necessary product data. Scroll down, scroll down, scroll down, and here, as you can see, we have a result. But it only, in this case it's interesting, it only showed me the total revenue, and it shows me the revenue in percentage, but it didn't show me the revenue in absolute values. So when I tried that before I walked on stage, it showed me both values, but as you said, Mario, sometimes the AI behaves like that, and an hour later it behaves a little bit different. I could ask the AI now to also give me the absolute values. It would correct its mistake. But I would like to show you something else. I would now like to ask the follow-up question, show me a table with the revenue per year per month. The system needs now to understand who are we talking about. It still relates to Orlando Guy. And it needs to understand that it now needs to do a different grouping. And see that? It understood that it needs to call the same function, but this time grouped by year and month. That's pretty amazing. So we will return something, and we will get the correct breakdown by year and month. See, January 22, and so on, and so on, and so on. And if we take a look at the SQL statement, this looks pretty exact. Now, as you can see, some of these months are missing. You see, we have January, we have nothing for February, we have nothing for March, and so on. Now, I will ask the system as the last demo, the table is missing some month. Probably because they did not buy anything in those months. Complete the table by adding 0 revenue for all the missing months. Okay, let's do that. And let's see what the system is going to do. You can ask yourself in your back of your mind, what do you think that ChatGPT is going to do? I have an idea, but as Mario said, ChatGPT is every time a little different. And you see, it did something very strange. If I take that, all this code, this one, and I here copy it out, I hope it worked, and if I open up, if I open up a new folder here and I press Control H and use regex and make something like that and make something like that and replace everything, do you see what ChatGPT did here? It used the result from the functions and used its code interpreter capabilities to generate on the fly a Python program where it copied and pasted all the values from our function into the code and used pandas data frame in order to fill all the necessary months and years and so on. This is pretty amazing, and with that we see what we have. And as a meta communication, what I want to show you is that ChatGPT can not just call your functions pretty intelligently. It can also post-process your data in a non-trivial way. Do you want to make complex statistical analysis on top of your data, but you are bored writing it on your own? Not you, Mario. You will write it on your own, of course, because you love that. People like me don't like that, or Alex. Yeah? I have no idea about statistics. I'm super happy that ChatGPT writes the Python code for me, and that's exactly what's going to happen. So we can combine all these tools, function calling, code interpreter, if we want retrieval to get something from a PDF or a CSV file, which you could upload, and ChatGPT will put all these things together and hopefully produce a very interesting output. And that is the power of function calling that I wanted to demonstrate to you. It's not a trivial thing doing all these things. The API isn't trivial. It's not trivial to describe functions here in a meaningful way. It's not trivial to come up with the correct description so that ChatGPT really understands what these functions do, particularly when you have to deal with large amounts of values. You cannot return 100,000 rows to ChatGPT and think that it will be able to process these rows. You have to come up with strategies around that. So don't think that this stuff is trivial, but it is pretty powerful. I hope that you have seen that from my presentation. That is what I wanted to show you, and it's very nice if the end of the content comes together with the end of the time. I will take 2 or 3 questions if you want before we close. Do you have any questions? Yes, please.
I wanted to ask if it would be possible for the user to create SQL injection through the...
Absolutely. The question is, can I generate an SQL exception? Absolutely. Give ChatGPT the capability of executing arbitrary queries, and you have probably not the world's first SQL injection for AI. It's really not good. And yes, there is, you as the developer, you have a lot of responsibility. Who said it? With a lot of power, there comes a lot of responsibility. Was it Spider-Man or the uncle of Spider-Man? Spider-Man's uncle, yeah, exactly. So yes, that's exactly true. Be careful what you allow the AI to do, okay? We had another question. Yeah, please.
What happens with the data in terms of security that you return from your custom functions?
A very good question. If you use a commercial ChatGPT subscription, as I do here, or you use Azure OpenAI, you have a contract that prevents Microsoft from using the data that you send it to train AIs. So no AIs are trained with the data of my query. Well, that's not true because AdventureWorks is open source. So probably the AI would know what AdventureWorks is, but in your case, it wouldn't use this data to train AIs. But you have to trust Microsoft and OpenAI that they do what they write into their contract. So you cannot run it locally. You have to trust them. Last question.
The code is executed on your machine?
Yes, that is correct.
How does it work with firewalls and so on? Because it's actually initiated out of a prompt?
Yes, the OpenAI will never call you with an incoming HTTP request. You send it the question with an outgoing HTTP request, and the function call comes in as the HTTP response. So you can keep your firewall totally closed. It just needs to allow the program to send outgoing HTTP requests using HTTPS. Same is true for streaming. Streaming does purely use the HTTP protocol. It's just an HTTP request that takes a little bit longer to complete and doesn't send you the complete response in one go, but package by package by package. So it's only HTTP, and it's not an incoming HTTP call. So firewall can be closed.
That means I have to program it in TypeScript or whatever, in some HTTP-based language.
You need to have a programming language that is capable of sending HTTP requests and receiving HTTP response. Whatever program you use, it's available as a REST API. You do not need a managed API. You can work on it using a REST API. That's true for the Assistant API and for the Production API. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for visiting me. And as this is the last talk of Global Azure, I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed Global Azure. I hope you had a great time, learned something, had great food. I heard that we have quite a bit of food left, so if you say, hey, this is now weekend, I didn't have the time to go shopping today, there is additional food down there, and you feel free to take something at home. Tell your colleagues how you enjoyed Global Azure, because hopefully we will do another Global Azure in the year 2025, and we would be happy to welcome you again. Thank you very much for coming.